What happens when life throws you into the arms of a stranger? Not in the comfort of the city, not under the watchful gaze of family or friends, but in the middle of nowhere, where survival is the only law. What happens when you are vulnerable, carrying a life inside you, and the only person beside you is a man you don't know, a man who hides more than his name, a man who might not even be fully human? Would you trust him? Would you fear him? Or would you find yourself drawn to him, even as every instinct screams that he carries a secret that could change everything? And if you were stranded on an island with such a man, and the world you once knew was stripped away, would you fight him, or let destiny bind you to him? This is the story of Amara, a woman carrying not just a child, but the weight of choices, fears, and a storm that changed everything. The sea did not whisper warnings that night. It roared them. The sky had been calm hours earlier, streaked with gentle pinks and oranges as the sun bled into the horizon. Amara had stood on the deck of the small cargo vessel, one hand pressed to the swell of her stomach, watching the ocean glitter beneath fading light. She had whispered a promise to the child inside her, a new life, a safer life, far from the shadows we left behind. But promises mean nothing to the sea. Clouds gathered without mercy. One moment the world was painted in firelight, the next darkness swallowed it whole. The horizon disappeared, replaced by a wall of black cloud so thick it seemed to devour the stars. Wind screamed across the deck, tearing ropes free, slamming wooden planks against the mast. Amara stumbled, clutching the railing, her pulse thrumming with panic. Her lips were dry, her throat raw, but she still whispered to the life inside her. "Hold on, baby. Please hold on." Lightning shattered the sky. For an instant the world turned white. She saw faces of the crew, eyes wide with fear, mouths open in shouts she could not hear over the storm's fury. Thunder bellowed like an angry god. Then the first wave struck. It hit the vessel broadside, a wall of water rising higher than the mast. The boat groaned, wood straining, before it tipped violently. Amara was thrown to the deck, her knees slamming hard. She cried out, her hands flying instinctively to her stomach. Pain radiated through her body, but the child kicked faintly, still there, still fighting. Another wave came, and then another, each one fiercer, tearing at the vessel as though the sea had chosen this night to destroy them. Lanterns crashed to the deck, oil spilling, flames sputtering before being swallowed by rain. The air filled with the stink of salt, smoke, and fear. The captain's voice rose above the chaos, barking orders in a language Amara did not understand. She tried to crawl toward the cabin, but the deck tilted again, throwing her against the railing. Her fingers clung to the wet wood, knuckles white, nails splintering. And then came the sound she would never forget, a crack like the snapping of the world itself. The mast split. The vessel tore apart. Screams filled the air, but the storm drowned them. Amara's lungs seized as icy water surged across the deck. She was lifted, weightless, then dragged into the blackness below. Salt water filled her mouth, burned her throat, clawed into her chest. She kicked, flailed, fought with a desperation sharpened by the child inside her. Through the chaos, through the flashes of lightning above the waves, she saw him, a man. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, shoulders broad as he struggled against the sea. His hand reached for wreckage, fingers grasping wood. Their eyes met for a heartbeat in the storm's glare, his silver, unnatural even in the chaos, glowing like molten steel. And then the sea dragged her under again. The world went black. When Amara opened her eyes, the world was still, her cheek pressed into coarse sand. If this story already has your heart racing, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That way you'll never miss the next dark, addictive tale of betrayal, passion, and fate. Trust me, you'll want to be here for every twist that's coming. The hiss of waves lapping against the shore was soft, almost mocking after the storm's rage. The air was heavy with brine and the musk of seaweed. Her body ached as though she had been beaten from every angle. Her clothes clung, soaked and torn. Her lips were cracked, her throat parched, but her first instinct was not for herself. Her trembling hands went to her stomach. Please. Please. A faint flutter pressed back against her palm. Relief so sharp it was nearly painful burst through her chest. Tears mingled with salt water on her face. Her baby still lived. She let out a shaky breath. We made it, sweetheart. We're still here. But the relief was short-lived. Not far from her, half buried in sand where the tide had left him, lay a man. Motionless. Amara froze. He was tall, his dark shirt ripped across a chest that seemed sculpted from stone. Muscles corded his arms, his skin bronzed despite the storm. His hair, black streaked with silver, clung to his face. Was he dead? She wanted to turn away, to leave him, to save her strength for herself and her child. But something, instinct, mercy, maybe fate, drew her forward. She crawled across the sand, her body protesting every movement until she knelt beside him. She hesitated, hand trembling, before pressing her fingers against his throat. Warm. A faint pulse. Alive. Her chest loosened, though she didn't understand why relief should matter for a stranger. She sat back, panting, her eyes lingering on him. He was no ordinary man. Something about his presence was heavier, sharper, even unconscious. She whispered hoarsely, "You survived too?" His chest rose and fell slowly, rhythm steady as the tide. Amara dragged herself a short distance away, collapsing under the shade of a palm. Her body shook with exhaustion, her mind swimming with questions. Where were they? How far from land? Was anyone else alive? And most pressing of all, who was this man? Hours passed, the sun climbing high, baking the sand until it burned her skin. She forced herself to move, searching for fresh water. Each step was agony. Her legs trembled, hunger gnawed at her belly, thirst burned her throat, but she pressed on, driven by the fluttering heartbeat inside her. The island was wild. Palm trees leaned skyward, their fronds whispering secrets. Strange birds darted overhead, their cries unfamiliar. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and damp earth. Shadows shifted in the undergrowth, though no animals showed themselves. More than once, she felt watched. Her gaze snapped to the trees at the edge of her vision, where leaves rustled without wind. Her pulse quickened. Was it her imagination? Or was the island not as empty as it seemed? When she returned to the beach, the man had stirred. He groaned, rolling slightly, sand clinging to his skin. His eyelids fluttered open. Amara froze. His eyes were not the dull brown or blue she expected. They were silver, piercing, too bright, too sharp, as though lightning had struck and never left them. Her breath caught. For a long moment, they stared at one another. She should have felt safer knowing she wasn't alone. But as his gaze locked on hers, something primal stirred inside her. Not fear, not trust, something far more dangerous. The sun sank lower, painting the sky with blood-red streaks. The island grew darker, shadows stretching long. Amara wrapped her arms protectively around her belly, whispering to her unborn child. "We're not alone. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse." The man's lips parted, his voice rough, deep, like gravel underfoot. "You survived." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but the words tangled in her throat. As night fell, she realized two truths that would change everything. She had survived, and so had he. But survival was only the beginning. The night pressed down like a heavy cloak, thick with the sense of salt, damp earth, and the strange perfume of flowers that clung to the air. Amara's heart hadn't slowed since the moment his silver eyes had opened. She sat a short distance away, knees drawn to her chest, arms curled protectively around her belly. She told herself to stay alert, to rest only one eye at a time. but exhaustion pulled at her like a tide. Still, she couldn't look away from him. The stranger, the survivor. He hadn't moved much since whispering those first words, rough, jagged syllables that had sounded more like a growl than speech. You survived. His voice still echoed in her ears. It hadn't been a statement of relief or even curiosity. It had sounded like recognition, as though survival bound them together in some way she didn't understand. Her pulse quickened whenever his gaze shifted toward her. She couldn't read him. His silver eyes were too sharp, too unearthly, and though his body looked battered by the storm, there was no weakness in the way he carried himself now. Even half-conscious, he radiated strength, an aura that filled the space between them, made the island itself feel smaller. Amara's throat tightened. She needed answers. She pushed herself onto her knees, ignoring the protest of sore muscles, and inched closer. "Can you hear me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse from salt and thirst. He blinked slowly, then rolled his head toward her. In the dim glow of moonlight, his features looked carved from stone, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, lips set in a firm line, brows furrowed as though some storm still raged inside him. "Yes," he murmured, the word deep, resonant. Relief fluttered through her, though it did little to ease the weight pressing on her chest. "Are you hurt?" she asked cautiously. His eyes narrowed, scanning her as though measuring more than her words. Finally, he shook his head once. "No." Amara didn't believe him. No one could go through that storm unscathed. She had bruises blossoming along her arms, cuts stinging across her palms, her entire body throbbing with pain. Yet here he was, calm, steady, his voice low but certain. "Who are you?" she pressed. For a long time he didn't answer. The silence stretched, filled only by the lap of waves and the distant cry of some night bird. Amara's palms grew damp. She wanted to retreat, to put distance between them, but something rooted her in place. Curiosity, fear, that strange pull she couldn't explain. At last he spoke. Kael. Just a name. But his voice made it feel like more. The syllable vibrated in her chest, lingered in the air like smoke. "Kael," she repeated softly, as if testing the weight of it. His gaze sharpened, lingering on her lips as though hearing his name in her voice stirred something inside him. Amara swallowed, suddenly aware of how close she was. The sand was cool beneath her knees, but her skin felt hot, her breath uneven. She should have looked away, but she couldn't. There was something dangerous in his stillness, something magnetic in the way his eyes refused to release hers. She pulled back slightly, clutching her belly. "I'm Amara," she offered at last, if only to break the intensity of his stare. For a moment his expression didn't change. Then, slowly, he nodded once, as if acknowledging not just her name but her existence in a way that made her shiver. They sat in silence, two strangers washed onto the edge of the world. Yet nothing about his presence felt accidental. Amara forced herself to think past the unease coiling in her chest. Survival. That was all that mattered now. She needed water, shelter, food. She needed to keep her child safe. She couldn't afford to waste energy on the mystery of who Kael was or why his eyes glowed like molten metal. But when she looked at him, she knew avoiding that mystery was impossible. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked. Kael's jaw clenched. His gaze shifted toward the ocean, now calm under the moonlight as if mocking the destruction it had caused. "The storm," he said simply. His voice was sharper now, more controlled, yet it still carried that rough edge that reminded her of thunder. Amara nodded slowly. "The ship, it's gone. I didn't see anyone else." His eyes flicked back to her, narrowing slightly. "Just us." The way he said it sent a chill through her. Not fear exactly. Something darker, heavier, as though the truth of their isolation carried a weight she wasn't ready to bear. She wrapped her arms tighter around her belly. Then we'll have to survive together. The words felt fragile in the night air, but necessary. She couldn't do this alone, not in her condition. She hated that truth, hated the vulnerability it revealed. But there it was. Kael studied her for a long time, expression unreadable. Finally, he inclined his head once. Agreement. Relief should have come, but instead a new tension curled in her stomach. Cooperation meant proximity. Proximity meant trust. And trust was dangerous. The hours dragged on, the night wrapping them in silence. Amara tried to rest, curling on the sand, but every rustle in the trees set her on edge. At one point she opened her eyes to find Kael watching her, not with malice, not even curiosity. His gaze was steady, unblinking like a predator at rest. Her heart thudded painfully. She shut her eyes again, whispering a prayer to the child inside her. Morning came with a blaze of sunlight. The beach glittered, the trees whispered, and the sea stretched endless and cruel. Amara sat up slowly, exhaustion pulling at every bone. Kael was already awake, crouched near the tree line. She froze, watching him. He was perfectly still, muscles coiled, head tilted slightly as though listening to something she couldn't hear. A bird darted overhead. Kael's eyes flicked toward it, and for a heartbeat they flashed. Silver bright, sharp as a blade. Amara's breath caught. She rubbed her eyes, telling herself it was the sun, a trick of light. But deep down, she knew better. Kael stood, moving with a grace that didn't belong to someone who had nearly drowned hours before. His body was built for survival. Broad shoulders, lean muscle, strength that seemed to hum beneath his skin. He turned toward her, and for a moment, she swore he could hear the quickening of her pulse. He walked back to her, stepped silent despite the sand. "We need water," he said simply, his voice low, steady. Amara nodded, though her mouth had gone dry. "I know." He offered a hand to help her stand. She hesitated, staring at it. His palm was large, strong, veins tracing the back of his hand like rivers. She wanted to refuse, to prove she didn't need him. But her legs trembled as she tried to rise, and pride gave way to necessity. Her fingers slid into his. Heat shot through her arm, startling her. His grip was firm, steady, pulling her effortlessly to her feet as though she weighed nothing at all. Amara gasped softly, both from the ease of his strength and the strange spark that lingered in her chest even after he released her. Kael said nothing, only turned toward the forest. "Come." She followed, every step uncertain, her mind a storm of questions. Who was this man? How could he move with such power after the storm? And why, despite every instinct warning her to be careful, did she feel that strange pull toward him, as though the island itself had conspired to place them together? The shadows of the trees swallowed them, and with each step deeper into the island, Amara's unease grew. She was not just walking beside a stranger. She was walking beside a man who was something more, something she couldn't yet name. And though she told herself it was fear that made her pulse race deep inside, she knew the truth. It wasn't just fear. It was the beginning of something she couldn't resist. The forest swallowed them whole. The moment they stepped beyond the tree line, the air changed. It was thicker here, damp and alive with the hum of insects and the distant cries of unseen creatures. Shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy in jagged beams, painting the undergrowth in shifting gold. The scent of moss and earth clung to every breath Amara took, heavy and sweet, like something ancient and untamed. Her hand lingered on her belly as she walked, the swell of life within her both a burden and a reason to push forward. Every step made her body ache, her legs trembling beneath her weight. But what choice did she have? The island offered no mercy. Kael moved ahead of her, silent, steady, as though the storm had never touched him. His broad shoulders rolled beneath his torn shirt, each movement efficient, purposeful. He didn't stumble, didn't pause to catch his breath. It was as if the island bent to his will, opening paths where there were none. Amara hated herself for staring, hated the way her gaze traced the strength carved into his back, the easy power in his stride. She should have feared him more. Every instinct told her this man was dangerous, his eyes too sharp, his presence too consuming. And yet, the danger drew her like a flame in the dark. Her foot snagged on a root. She gasped, stumbling forward, but before she could hit the ground, Kael's hand was on her arm. His grip caught her effortlessly, steadying her before she even had time to cry out. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low, rough, close to her ear. Heat shot through her at the sound of it, at the way his hand lingered for a breath too long on her arm before releasing her. She forced herself to nod, to swallow the unsteady rhythm of her heart. "The ground is uneven," she whispered, as if making excuses for her weakness. But Kael only studied her for a moment, his silver eyes unreadable. Then he turned away, pressing deeper into the forest. They walked for what felt like hours. Amara's throat burned with thirst, her stomach twisting with hunger. Each step sent waves of exhaustion through her body, but Kael never slowed. He scanned the forest constantly, head tilting at sounds she could barely hear, body tense as though prepared for attack. At one point, the brush rustled violently nearby. Amara froze, her heart leaping into her throat. A small animal darted from the undergrowth, a wild boar, tusks gleaming, muscles tense. Its beady eyes fixed on her for a split second before flicking toward Kael. And then, it bolted. Not away from her, but away from him. Amara's breath caught. Animals ran from predators. That was instinct. And yet she had never seen fear so sharp in a creature's eyes. She turned toward Kael, but he was already moving as if nothing strange had happened. "This way," he said, his voice steady, commanding. Questions burned in her chest, but she swallowed them. Survival first, mystery later. Finally, the forest opened into a small clearing. A thin stream trickled across smooth stones, the water glittering like glass. Amara almost collapsed at the sight of it. She hurried forward, dropping to her knees, cupping trembling hands into the stream. "Slowly," Kael said sharply, crouching beside her. His hand brushed hers, steadying her movements. "Not too fast. Your body's weak. You'll be sick." She wanted to snap at him, to remind him she wasn't a child. But the concern in his voice disarmed her. It wasn't the detached tone of a stranger. It was protective, instinctive, as though her well-being mattered to him more than his own. Amara sipped carefully, cool water soothing her cracked throat. She closed her eyes, letting relief wash through her. "Thank God," she whispered. But when she opened her eyes, Kael was watching her. His gaze wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was intense. The kind of stare that stripped away layers, that saw more than it should. Her lips parted. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the whisper of the stream, the rustle of leaves above them. Then Kael looked away. He stood smoothly, scanning the tree line again. "We'll build shelter here," he said. "Near water. Safer." Amara nodded, though her pulse still raced. She told herself it was exhaustion, relief, anything but the truth. Anything but the magnetic pull she felt toward him. They worked together in silence. Kael gathered branches and leaves with uncanny precision, his movements quick, assured. He snapped thick limbs as though they were twigs, his strength unsettling in its effortlessness. Amara tried to help, carrying smaller branches, weaving leaves into crude walls. Every time her body faltered, Kael was there, steadying her, lifting the heavier loads, silently guiding her without ever needing to ask. By the time the sun dipped low, the shelter stood, a small lean-to against the trees, crude but strong. Amara sat within it, exhaustion pressing her down. Her hands rested on her belly, rubbing soothing circles as the child shifted restlessly inside. Kael crouched outside, watching the fire he had coaxed from damp wood and stone. The flames reflected in his silver eyes, making them glow eerily in the darkness. Amara shivered, though the fire was warm. She wanted to ask who he really was, why the animals feared him, why his strength seemed more than human. But the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Kael turned his head slightly, his gaze flicking toward her. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something unreadable, dangerous, yet softer than she expected. "You and the child come first," he said simply. The words struck her like a blade of heat. He hadn't said your child. He had said the child, as if it already mattered to him too. As if its survival was as important to him as his own. Silence fell between them again, heavy but not empty. The fire crackled, the forest whispered, and somewhere in the distance, something howled. Amara stiffened, her eyes darting to the shadows beyond the firelight. Kael's head snapped toward the sound, every muscle in his body going taut. His eyes gleamed brighter, predator sharp, and for a moment Amara swore his lips curled in the faintest growl. But just as quickly, the moment passed. He stood, slow and deliberate, scanning the darkness. "Stay inside," he ordered, his voice edged with something primal. Amara nodded, pulling the blanket of palm leaves tighter around her body. She watched him as he moved toward the shadows, every step silent, powerful. He didn't move like a man. He moved like something else, something the night itself obeyed. Her breath caught in her throat. Fear, yes, but not just fear. Something else coiled in her chest, something dangerous, irresistible. As Kael disappeared into the dark, Amara pressed her hands protectively over her stomach. She whispered to her unborn child, her voice trembling. "We're not just surviving, little one. Something else is happening here. Something bigger than us." The fire crackled. The forest hushed. And deep in her bones, Amara knew the stranger was no ordinary man. And if she was going to survive this island, she would have to trust him, even if trusting him meant losing herself. The forest whispered around them like a living thing. The lean-to they had managed to build stood fragile against the towering trees, its walls a lattice of branches and palm fronds bound together by vines Kael had stripped with his bare hands. The fire at the edge of the shelter flickered in restless patterns, its light throwing long shadows that danced over Kael's broad back and Amara's tired face. The air was damp, heavy, still clinging to the aftermath of the storm. It smelled of wet earth, wood smoke, and something wilder, something that clung to Kael every time he moved near her, a scent that wasn't entirely human. Amara sat just inside the crude shelter, her knees pulled close, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. The child stirred within her, restless as if it too sensed the strange current in the air. Exhaustion pressed on her like a weight, but she couldn't close her eyes. Not yet. Kael crouched at the fire, his silver eyes reflecting the flames like molten steel. His presence filled the clearing, not just his size but his energy, as if the forest itself bent around him. He had said little since they'd settled here, speaking only when necessary. Yet his silence wasn't cold. It was measured, deliberate, as if words were a luxury he couldn't afford. Amara studied him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way his muscles coiled and stretched beneath his torn shirt, the precision with which he added branches to the fire, every motion efficient, the way the night seemed to hush around him, predators lurking in the dark but never daring to come closer. She shivered, part from the night air, part from him. "Rest," Kael said suddenly, his voice deep, rough-edged, startling in its quiet authority. "You need your strength. The child needs it too." Amara swallowed. The child. He always said it that way. Not hers. Not yours. The child. As though he had already claimed some stake in its survival. She shook her head faintly. "I'll try." But when she lay back on the mat of leaves Kael had arranged for her, her body stiffened with unease. The forest was alive with sound, the drone of insects, the hiss of wind through the trees, the occasional rustle in the undergrowth that made her heart hammer, and beneath it all something else, a low, steady rhythm she couldn't place, like breathing, like a heartbeat too large to belong to any man. Her eyes fluttered shut anyway. Exhaustion dragged her down like a tide. Sleep came, but it did not bring peace. She dreamed of the storm again, the sky splitting open in white fury, the sea swallowing her whole. She dreamed of the moment she had been flung into the waves, of arms dragging her toward the surface. But in the dream, those arms were claws. Silver eyes glowed in the darkness beneath the water, pulling her down, not saving her. And when she surfaced on the beach, she was alone. No Kael, no stranger, just her unborn child, and the sound of something growling in the forest. She jerked awake with a gasp. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her skin slick with cold sweat. And Kael was there. He crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. His touch was steady, grounding, but it sent heat coursing through her all the same. His silver eyes caught the firelight, softer now, less like steel, more like moonlight. "You cried out," he said, his voice low. "Nightmares." Amara tried to catch her breath, her hand instinctively covering her belly. It felt so real. The storm, the water, something chasing me. Kael's hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. Then slowly he drew it back. "Dreams cannot hurt you," he murmured, "but they can remind you of what you fear." His words should have been comfort. They weren't. They carried too much weight, as though he knew fear more intimately than anyone should. Amara sat up, her body trembling. The fire popped and hissed, sparks floating into the night. She glanced at Kael, at the strange way he seemed to belong to the darkness yet remain untouched by it. She wanted to ask, "Who are you, really? Why do the animals fear you? Why do I feel safer with you than I should?" But the words tangled on her tongue. Instead, she whispered, "I shouldn't feel safe with you. I don't even know you." Kael's gaze locked onto hers. The intensity in it stole her breath. "You don't need to know me," he said. "You only need to know this. No harm will touch you while I draw breath. You and the child. That is my vow." Her lips parted, 1,000 questions rising, but none made it out. His vow wasn't just words. She felt it, heavy in the air between them, binding, unbreakable. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled, shadows danced. Kael's eyes softened just slightly, his expression unreadable, but no longer distant. Amara's heart thudded in her chest, not just with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Desire. She hated herself for it. She was pregnant. She was vulnerable. She had no right to feel the way she did when he looked at her. And yet, she couldn't stop. Kael shifted back, resettling near the fire. The flames painted him in shades of gold and shadow, highlighting the hard lines of his jaw, the strength of his body. He was silent again, but the air between them was no longer empty. It was charged, alive. Amara lay back down, though she knew sleep would not come easily. She closed her eyes, but every sound of the forest was sharper now. Every breath Kael took near the fire louder, more intimate. At some point, her exhaustion dragged her under again. This time, when the nightmare came, it was different. She dreamed of silver eyes watching her from the tree line, of a wolf's silhouette in the firelight, its body merging with Kael's in a blur of shadow and moonlight. She dreamed of his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm, pulling her back from the darkness. And she dreamed of his voice, low and rough, whispering her name as though he had known it long before she ever told him. When she woke again, the fire was low, its glow soft and fading. Kael was gone. Panic shot through her chest. She pushed herself upright, her heart racing. The forest loomed around her, vast and silent. Too silent. Then she saw him. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his back to her, his head tilted as though listening to something far away. His body was tense, every muscle coiled, his stance that of a predator waiting to strike. "Kael?" she whispered. He didn't answer. For a moment, he didn't even move. Then slowly his head turned, and his eyes found hers across the fire's dying glow. They weren't just silver now. They glowed, faint, but unmistakable, like the moon itself burned inside him. Amara froze, her breath caught in her throat, and then, just as quickly the glow faded, his expression smoothed, unreadable once more. He walked back to the fire, crouched and began feeding it with fresh wood as though nothing had happened. But Amara knew what she had seen. She lay back down slowly, her body trembling. She didn't speak, neither did he, but the air between them was thick with unspoken truths. The first night had come, and with it, the promise of something far more dangerous than storms, hunger, or fear. Because the stranger she was stranded with was no stranger at all. He was something else, and she had just begun to glimpse it. The fire had burned low, reduced now to embers that glowed like tired eyes in the dark. The forest pressed in around their small shelter, shadows stretching long and jagged, as if the night itself wanted to swallow them whole. Amara sat upright, her knees pulled close to her chest, one hand resting protectively on the curve of her stomach. Sleep had not come easy. Every time her eyes slipped shut, she heard something too deliberate to be the wind, too heavy to be dismissed as the scurry of small animals. Kael sat across from her, his back straight, eyes glinting faintly in the red light of the fire. He hadn't moved in what felt like hours. Silent, still, watching. He was a stranger, yet the only anchor she had in this nightmare. She wanted to ask him what he was hearing, what he was seeing, but something in his posture stopped her. There was a sharpness about him tonight, a predator's edge, and she felt that if she broke his concentration, she might unleash something she wasn't ready to face. Then it came. The sound that tore through the night like a blade. A guttural growl, low and rumbling, drifting through the trees. Amara's breath hitched. It was close. Too close. Her hand flew to her mouth as if silence could make her invisible. Kael rose slowly, his every movement deliberate, controlled. He didn't reach for a weapon, though a makeshift spear lay within arm's reach. Instead, he tilted his head, listening with an intensity that was almost inhuman. Amara's heart raced. For one moment she thought, no, she knew. His ears had twitched, like an animal catching sound. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned his gaze on her, and for an instant, she swore his eyes weren't just reflecting the firelight. They were glowing faintly, silver, unnatural. "Stay here," he said, voice low, commanding, a growl buried beneath the words. Before she could argue, he slipped out into the darkness. The fire crackled. The night swallowed him. Amara sat frozen, fighting the surge of fear clawing at her chest. Alone now, every rustle, every whisper of leaves made her flinch. She hated the vulnerability, hated that her body was heavy and slow with pregnancy when every instinct screamed at her to run. Minutes dragged into eternities. Then the silence broke. A snarl, violent, bone deep. The sound of something crashing through the underbrush, a roar that made her skin prickle and her unborn child kick sharply, as if reacting to the primal terror vibrating in the air. Amara clutched her belly, her lips moving in silent prayer. She didn't know who or what Kael was fighting, but she knew one thing. No ordinary man could make a sound like the one she had just heard spill from his throat. The forest erupted with chaos, growls, the tearing of earth, the desperate cries of some wounded beast. She tried not to imagine what it looked like, but her mind painted pictures anyway. Kael, locked in a struggle with something monstrous, his body moving with impossible speed, his strength unnatural. Then, silence. The stillness was heavier than the noise had been, suffocating her. She wanted to call out his name, but the word lodged in her throat. Her palms were slick with sweat. She listened, straining, desperate for a sign, any sign, that he was alive. And then, he emerged. Kael stepped back into the clearing, the shadows clinging to him, as if reluctant to let go. His chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, his skin glistening with sweat. His shirt was torn, blood smeared across the fabric, though she couldn't tell if it was his or the creature's. His eyes, those impossible silver eyes, still burned faintly in the darkness. "What happened?" Amara asked, her voice breaking. He didn't answer at first. He only crouched by the fire, feeding it with a few dry sticks, as though the ordinary act might erase the savagery of what had just transpired. "It's gone," he said finally, his tone clipped, final. "What was it?" Kael's jaw tightened. He stared into the flames, avoiding her gaze. "A predator. You don't need to worry about it anymore." But she was worried. Not about the creature, but about him. The way he had moved, the sounds he had made. No man she had ever known could fight like that. Her father had been a hunter, her brothers too. She had seen men battle beasts before, but Kael, he hadn't fought like a man, he had fought like something else, something primal, something dangerous. Amara didn't press further, not yet. Instead, she lowered herself back onto the mat of palm leaves, though her body remained tense, alert. Sleep was impossible. Her mind spun with questions she couldn't yet give voice to. Who was this man really? And what had she stumbled into by being stranded with him? The night stretched long. Twice more she heard sounds in the distance, whimpers, whines, as if some unseen creature mourned the loss of its kin. Each time Kael's body stiffened, his nostrils flaring slightly, as if he were scenting the air. And each time, Amara bit her tongue, holding back the flood of questions clawing at her throat. At last, dawn broke. The sky bled from black to deep violet to pale gold. Birds called hesitantly at first, then with growing courage, as though they too had feared the night. Amara rose stiffly, her back aching, her body heavy. She moved toward the edge of the camp, craving fresh air beyond the scent of smoke and blood. That's when she saw it. Just beyond the clearing, carved deep into the bark of a tree, were claw marks. Long, vicious, deliberate. No animal she knew could cut into wood like that. And worse, there were footprints in the earth. Large. Bare. Too large for any man. Her breath caught. She turned back toward Kael, who was crouched by the fire again, sharpening a stick into a spear. He hadn't noticed her discovery, or perhaps he had and was pretending otherwise. Her heart pounded. A part of her screamed to confront him, to demand the truth. But another part, the deeper, more primal part, told her not to. Not yet. Because the truth might be more dangerous than the lies. She touched her stomach again, whispering under her breath. What have we gotten ourselves into? Kael's head lifted, his silver eyes locking onto hers across the camp. For a heartbeat, she thought he had heard her words, though she hadn't spoken loudly. A slow, unreadable smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, and then he looked away, back to his work. The day had begun, but Amara knew the real darkness hadn't left. It was here, walking beside her in the shape of a man who was no man at all. And deep inside, though fear gnawed at her, another emotion stirred, one she couldn't quite admit. Curiosity. The kind that burned, the kind that could destroy her. But she couldn't stop. Not now. The dawn after the night of blood and shadows came reluctantly, as if even the sun feared to trespass upon whatever had prowled the island hours before. Mist coiled low through the trees, curling like smoke between roots and rocks, cloaking the clearing where Amara and Kael had made their fragile refuge. The claw marks still burned in Amara's mind. They had been too deliberate, too savage, gouged into bark so deeply she could fit her whole hand inside one of the grooves. No ordinary animal could have done that. And the footprints, bare, massive, unmistakably human, haunted her more than she dared admit. She had told herself to wait, to breathe, to not confront Kael until she understood what questions needed asking. But patience had never been her strong suit, and with her child shifting restlessly inside her, every nerve in her body screamed that time was running short. Kael crouched by the embers, coaxing them back into flame with movements so practiced, so controlled, that Amara wondered how long he had lived like this. How many nights had he spent in wild places, keeping the fire alive not only to ward off cold, but to keep whatever prowled in the dark at bay. His shirt clung to his back in tatters, still streaked faintly with dried blood from the fight. He bore no wound that she could see, not one. That was what made her mouth go dry. No scratches, no cuts, no bruises. She stepped closer, her bare feet sinking into the damp earth. "You were gone," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Last night." Kael did not look up. He fed a larger branch into the fire, the crackle filling the silence between them. "You needed to rest." "That's not what I asked." Her hand trembled where it rested on her belly, but she didn't let her voice waver. "Where did you go?" His silver eyes lifted at last, catching the light like molten steel. The intensity in them made her pulse stutter. He held her gaze for a long, unbroken moment, then said evenly, "It doesn't matter where I went. What matters is that you were safe." "Safe?" She almost laughed. Safe from the predator, or safe from him? Amara shook her head, the unease twisting tighter. "I heard you," she whispered, "out there in the forest. The sounds you made." "Kael, no man sounds like that." She took a step closer, her breath coming faster now. "And this morning, I saw them. The claw marks, the footprints. Don't tell me it was just an animal. I've lived around hunters all my life. I know the difference." His jaw tightened. His silence was sharper than words. "Tell me the truth," she pressed, her voice cracking on the last word. "What are you?" For a moment she thought he might explode, that the storm she saw building in his silver eyes would finally break. But instead, Kael rose slowly, towering over her, the air between them charged with heat and something far darker. He lowered his head until his lips brushed her ear, his voice a growl wrapped in restraint. "What I am is the only thing standing between you and death on this island. That's all you need to know." Amara's breath caught. His words were meant to warn, perhaps even to frighten her, but the nearness of him, his heat, his scent, his presence that filled every inch of space, sent a treacherous shiver racing down her spine. She pulled back, anger warring with fear. "That's not enough," she snapped. "I deserve to know who I've been left here with. I deserve to know what kind of man." He cut her off with a single word, sharp as a blade. "Man." His eyes burned into hers. "I am a man, Amara. Remember that. Whatever else you think you've seen, whatever you think you know, don't forget it." Her throat tightened. He was lying. Or half lying. And somehow that was worse. The tension between them crackled like the fire, dangerous and alive. She wanted to push, to claw at the truth until it spilled from him. But another part of her, the part that remembered the way his body had moved in the dark, the way the forest itself seemed to bow around him, warned that if he told her everything, she might never sleep again. Her hand found her belly again, grounding her. She closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was softer, breaking. "I can't do this alone. If something happens to me out here, my child." Her breath hitched. "It'll be alone too, and that terrifies me more than any claw marks or predators or even you." The admission cracked something open in the clearing. Kael's expression shifted, not softened exactly, but wavered. The predator's mask slipped, revealing something raw beneath it. He reached for her without thinking, his roughened palm covering her smaller hand where it pressed to her stomach. His heat spread through her, steadying, burning. "You won't be alone," he said, the words low, certain, heavy with promise. "Not while I breathe, not while I stand." The vow was the same as before, but now it sank deeper, laced with something more dangerous. Intimacy. Amara looked up at him, her lashes wet. Why do you care? The question silenced him. His thumb brushed against her knuckles, slow, almost reverent. For a heartbeat he looked as if he might finally tell her, finally let her glimpse the truth behind the shadows. His lips parted, his eyes burned. But then, he pulled back. The connection severed, leaving her hand suddenly cold. Because it's my choice, he said at last, his voice clipped, final. Her heart ached with frustration. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand every secret he hoarded. Instead, she swallowed hard and turned away, blinking furiously against the tears threatening to fall. The day stretched on with heavy silence. Kael busied himself fortifying their shelter, fashioning tools with a precision that spoke of years surviving in unforgiving places. Amara gathered fruit and leaves where she could, her body aching with the weight of pregnancy, her mind burning with unanswered questions. Each time their eyes met, something unsaid passed between them, something that lingered, seductive and suffocating all at once. By nightfall, the air was thick with humidity and tension. The fire cracked and spat, throwing flickering light across Kael's face as he sharpened another spear. Amara sat nearby, watching him, her heart pounding with words she no longer knew how to contain. Kael, she whispered at last. His head lifted, eyes locking onto hers immediately, as if he had been waiting for her voice. She swallowed, her voice trembling. Whatever you are, whatever you're hiding, I don't care if it's monstrous. I just need to know you won't turn on me. That you won't... Her breath faltered. That you won't hurt us. For a long moment, the fire popped and hissed between them. Then Kael leaned forward, the shadows carving his face into something both beautiful and fearsome. I would sooner tear the world apart with my own hands than harm you, he said. The words rumbled from deep in his chest, a vow that felt less like language and more like instinct. Her body shivered at the sound, a mix of fear and something darker, something dangerous. She believed him. Saints help her. She believed him. But belief did not erase the truth she had seen in his eyes. That faint, unnatural glow, the claw marks, the beast that walked like a man. As the fire burned low and the forest pressed close once more, Amara lay awake on the mat of leaves, her heart pounding in her ears. Kael sat watch beside the flames, a shadow among shadows. His profile was sharp, still, but every so often, when the fire caught just right, she swore his eyes glimmered again, silver, unearthly, impossible. And she realized with a chill that stole her breath, the man she was stranded with might keep her safe, but from whom and from what she still did not know. The secrets remained buried, but the cracks in the earth had already formed, and when they split open, when the truth came clawing out from the dark, nothing would ever be the same again. The night was a living thing. The jungle whispered with restless leaves, the ocean roared somewhere beyond the cliffs, and the moon rose like a silver blade in the heavens, sharp, cold, merciless. Amara lay in the fragile cocoon of their shelter, staring at the fire's fading embers, her pulse refusing to slow. Sleep should have claimed her. Her body begged for it. But her mind, her heart, even the restless child turning within her, none would allow it. Kael had gone still hours ago, seated like a sentinel at the fire's edge, silver eyes fixed upon the dark. He looked like a statue carved from shadows, too perfect, too still, too unnatural. And then, he moved. It was subtle at first. A flick of his head as if listening to a sound she could not hear, a tightening of his jaw. Then without a word, Kael rose. Amara held her breath. He didn't take a spear, didn't so much as glance back at her. He simply melted into the night, vanishing into the jungle with the kind of silence no man could manage. Her heart pounded. She could stay. Pretend she hadn't seen him go. Pretend she could trust him to return. But the images haunted her. The claw marks, the footprints too large to be human, the glow in his eyes that wasn't firelight at all. If she didn't follow, she might never learn the truth. And so, against every instinct for self-preservation, Amara rose. Her steps were careful, her breath shallow as she pushed past vines and roots. The night air pressed heavy against her skin, thick with humidity and something sharper, electric. Each sound made her jump, the screech of a bird, the distant crash of waves, but her focus was fixed on the man who wasn't just a man, slipping further into the dark. The jungle thinned as she climbed after him, her body straining, the weight of her pregnancy slowing her. She nearly turned back twice, fear clawing at her throat, but then she saw him, Kael, emerging into a clearing bathed in moonlight. And she froze. He stood with his head tipped back, silver eyes glowing brighter than she had ever seen, his chest heaving as if the air itself burned him. His hands trembled at his sides, fists clenched. He tore at the remnants of his shirt, fabric ripping beneath his fingers as though it offended him simply by touching his skin. And then it began. The sound was wrong. A low rumble, not from his throat but from deep within his chest, vibrating through the night. His spine arched, muscles rippling beneath his skin in violent waves. Bones cracked, sharp and sickening. His body convulsed, twisted. Amara clapped a hand over her mouth, biting back a cry as she watched the impossible unfold. His jaw lengthened, his shoulders broadened. Hair spread like wildfire across his arms, his chest, his back. Fingers curled, bones snapping, nails sharpening into claws that caught the moonlight like blades. Kael fell to his knees, his roar shattering the silence of the island. A sound so primal, so furious, the trees themselves seemed to shudder. When he lifted his head again, it wasn't a man's face that met the moon. It was the wolf. Enormous, silver-eyed, magnificent, and terrifying. His fur was dark as midnight, threaded with streaks of silver like starlight woven into muscle. His form radiated raw power, a predator carved from nightmares and dreams alike. Amara stumbled back, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest. Every part of her screamed to run, to flee, to get as far away from the beast as she could. But her feet betrayed her, rooted in awe, in horror, in something else she couldn't name. Because it wasn't just monstrous, it was beautiful. Kael, the man who had fought to protect her, who had carried her when she faltered, whose hand had steadied hers in the dark, was the beast. The beast was him, the alpha. The wolf threw back his head and howled, the sound carrying across the island, shaking her to her core. It was a call of claim, of power, of loneliness so fierce it tore at her chest. And for one terrible, spellbound heartbeat, Amara felt it resonate inside her, as if the howl was meant for her alone. Her gasp broke the spell. The wolf's head snapped toward her, silver eyes blazing. He saw her. Panic surged through her veins. She stumbled backward, tripping over roots, scrambling to her feet again. But the wolf didn't chase her. He didn't pounce. He stalked forward with deliberate grace, each step radiating menace and something darker. Recognition. "Stay back," she whispered, though her voice was nothing against the thunder of her pulse. "Kael. Oh God, Kael." The wolf stopped mere feet from her, muscles coiled, breath steaming in the cold night air. And then, his form shuddered. His body bent, twisted, shrank, bones snapping back into place until the man stood before her once more, naked and trembling, his skin slick with sweat, his eyes still glowing faintly with that impossible silver light. "Amara," he rasped, his voice hoarse, raw. "You shouldn't have followed me." Her knees gave out and she collapsed against a tree trunk, her entire body shaking. "What are you?" she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the weight of centuries seemed to sit behind his gaze. "I am what you saw," he said. "I am Alpha." Her throat closed. Alpha. The word sounded like a myth, like a curse, like something whispered in old stories to frighten children. And yet here he stood, undeniable. You're not human, she breathed. I am both, he said, stepping closer, though he kept his hands open, his stance careful, as if afraid she might break at his touch. Man and beast, blood and shadow. It is not a choice. It is what I was born to be. She shook her head violently. No, that's not possible. That's not real. It is real, Kael said, voice low, steady. As real as the child you carry. As real as the danger that hunts me. Her eyes flew to his. Danger? He nodded once, jaw tight. I am exiled. My pack cast me out. But an alpha does not simply vanish. Power like mine. It calls to others. Challenges them, threatens them. They will come, Amara. Sooner or later they will follow my scent. And when they do... His voice broke into a growl. They will not stop at me. They will take what I protect. They will take you. Amara's breath hitched. The weight of his words pressed down like stone. She wrapped her arms around her belly instinctively, as if her embrace alone could shield her unborn child. Her mind screamed at her to run, to hide, to push him away. But her heart, treacherous and aching, whispered another truth. He had kept her alive. He had sworn to never harm her. And now she knew why. Why me? She whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Why protect me? Kael's chest heaved. His eyes softened, though the fire still burned in them. He crouched before her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his skin. His hand hovered, trembling, before it brushed the side of her face with reverence that undid her. Because you remind me I am still a man, he said. Because when I look at you, I don't just see prey or weakness or a burden. I see something I thought I had lost forever. Her heart fractured, rebuilt, and broke again in the space of a single breath. But before she could speak, before she could demand the rest of the truth, a sound tore through the night, another howl. This one was not Kael's. It came from the distance, from the jungle beyond, low, guttural, filled with challenge. Amara froze, terror rooting her in place. What was that? Kael's eyes blazed, his muscles taut as a bowstring. It means, he growled, we are no longer alone. The jungle did not sleep after the other howl. It breathed differently, a sharp pulse thrumming through the branches, the leaves, the earth beneath their feet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as though it too feared to move too loudly in the presence of what prowled unseen. The fire back at their shelter crackled faintly in Amara's memory, but here, under the suffocating canopy and the swollen moon, there was no warmth. Only fear. Kael's body was a fortress of tension. His silver eyes scanned the tree line, his breath low and deliberate, every muscle quivering like a bowstring pulled to its breaking point. His hand hovered protectively near her arm, though he didn't touch. Not yet. Another, Amara whispered, her voice brittle as glass. There's another one. Kael's gaze flicked to her, sharp, burning. Yes. The single word made her blood run colder. Her thoughts tangled, panic knotting around her ribs. She had just seen the man she trusted, the man who carried her when she faltered, who fought shadows for her safety, split apart and become something out of nightmares. She had watched his skin tear into fur, his voice unravel into howls. And now, as if the revelation were not enough, the night announced more like him. Her body wanted to scream, to run, to collapse in tears. But she didn't move, couldn't, because despite everything, her eyes kept dragging back to him. Kael, not the beast she had seen in moonlight, but the man, the way his jaw clenched, the subtle tremor in his hands, the flicker of vulnerability beneath the feral strength. For the first time, Amara realized something terrifying. He wasn't just shielding her. He was afraid too. What do they want? She asked, her hand clutching her belly as though she could cradle her unborn child out of reach. Kael's lips pulled back in a grimace. Not quite a snarl, not quite a smile. Blood. Power. The right to take what I've left behind. They will sense weakness, and they will come for it. For me. For you. Her chest tightened. Then what chance do we have? He turned to her fully then, silver eyes locking onto hers, luminous in the shadows. I am your chance. The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. Not when she had seen the monster that lived beneath his skin. Not when she still felt the echo of his howl vibrating in her bones. Her voice broke, trembling through her teeth. I don't know if I should trust you, Kael. I don't even know what you are anymore. He flinched, the movement so subtle she almost missed it. The great alpha, the wolf who had brought the night itself to its knees, recoiled at her words like a man cut too deeply. His shoulders dropped, his jaw worked, and when he finally spoke, his voice was stripped of arrogance. Then let me tell you, he said softly, almost pleading, before the others arrive, before fear makes you turn from me forever. The ground between them seemed to shrink. His presence pressed around her, heat and shadow and something achingly human despite what she had witnessed. I was exiled, he said. His gaze slid to the dirt, as though the words were a confession carved into his bones. Not for cruelty, not for slaughter, but because I refused an order no alpha should ever give. Amara frowned, her pulse thundering. What order? His eyes flicked back to her, raw with memory. To burn a village, innocents, children. His voice cracked on the last word, the beast beneath his skin snarling even at the memory. I was told their blood was necessary to prove our strength, to break them before they could rise against us. I refused. I fought my own. I killed those who would have butchered the weak, and for that they called me traitor. Amara's breath caught. She expected horror, but instead something warmer, dangerous, slipped into her chest. You spared them, she whispered. He nodded, slow, deliberate. I saved lives, but saving lives cost me everything. My pack, my claim, my name. And now, even here, the blood I carry marks me. I am alpha, but alpha alone, exile, outcast. The jungle pressed closer, shadows shifting, but Amara barely felt them. Her eyes burned, her chest tight. She thought of the man she once trusted, the father of her unborn child, whose words had always been softer than his hands, whose smile had always concealed cruelty. He had never protected her, never chosen her, and yet this stranger, this beast cloaked in silver fire, had carried exile and loneliness just to stand against cruelty. Her throat ached. You're not the monster I thought. Kael's lips twitched, the faintest shadow of a smile, though his eyes remained stormy. I am a monster, Amara. Make no mistake, but I am not theirs, and I will not be yours. Her heart stumbled. Against her will, against every warning screaming inside her, she believed him. Silence thickened. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And in that breath, something shifted. Amara's fear did not vanish. It clung to her ribs, whispered in her veins. But it tangled now with something new, something softer and more dangerous. Trust. Not complete, not certain, but a seed planted where none had been before. She drew a shaky breath, her voice unsteady. You could have killed me the first night, or left me, or let me starve. But you didn't. You stayed. Her hand rested on her stomach, trembling. You've done more for me in days than he ever did in years. Kael stilled. His eyes flicked to her belly, then back to her face. The heat in his gaze deepened, thickened, until it made her shiver. He stepped closer, so near she felt the brush of his breath. His hand lifted, hesitated, then rested lightly, so lightly on hers where it shielded her child. His palm was rough, calloused, but the touch was reverent, trembling. You should not trust me, he murmured. I am danger made flesh. I am shadow and blood. But if you give me your fear, I will guard it. If you give me your trust. His voice broke, husky, almost a growl. I will never betray it. Her breath tangled in her throat. Her body burned, trembled, warred with itself. Fear and desire, terror and longing, colliding until she didn't know which one ruled her more. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, silence spoke, the kind that wrapped around them like a vow, like a secret neither dared yet to voice. For the first time since the shipwreck, Amara did not feel entirely alone. And for the first time since his exile, Kael did not feel entirely lost. The howl of the other wolf drifted again through the jungle, closer now, vibrating through the ground. But it no longer shattered them. Not completely, because between the fear and the fire, something else had been born, something that could not be unmade. The island did not wake gently. It shuddered. The air itself carried a warning, thick with the scent of storm and blood, though no rain had yet fallen. The trees whispered secrets in voices too low for human ears, but Kael heard them. His body was tuned to the rhythm of threat, every muscle taut, every instinct sharpening into a blade. They were no longer whispers in the dark. They were here. Amara felt it too, though she could not explain how. A coldness threaded through her veins, an ache in her bones that no fire could soothe. She pressed a hand against her belly as if to still the restless flutter of the child inside her. The baby seemed to know. Perhaps it did. "Kael," she whispered, her voice trembling with the fragility of glass. "It's closer tonight, isn't it?" He didn't answer at first. His silver eyes scanned the tree line, glowing faint as moonlit steel. The silence was worse than words, for it told her the truth. Danger was not merely approaching. It had arrived. Finally he spoke, low and guttural. "They've touched the island." Her heart lurched. "They... shifters," Kael snarled, the word a curse and a wound. "Hunters, rivals, wolves who would see me finished." Amara's mouth went dry. "How many?" Kael tilted his head, listening to what only he could hear, the crunch of paws on underbrush, the hiss of breath carried on wind. His jaw tightened. "At least 2. Perhaps more. 1 alpha for certain. His scent. It is one I know." Her stomach twisted with nausea. "They're coming for you." His eyes flicked to hers, silver fire igniting in their depths. "No, Amara. They're coming for us." The words slammed into her chest. She wrapped her arms around herself, around her unborn child, as fear climbed her spine like fire. But even as her body trembled, something else stirred. The seed of trust she had given him in the jungle, now tangled with dread. "What will they do if they find us?" she asked, her voice ragged. Kael's lips curled back, exposing a flash of teeth that were not fully human. "They will tear me apart for the insult of surviving exile, and they will not spare you. A pregnant woman? They'll see weakness, bait, a chance to test me." Amara's breath broke. "And the baby? They will not touch it," Kael growled, the sound vibrating with a violence that made her shiver. "Not while I draw breath." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them. Then Kael stepped closer, his hand brushing the air near her cheek, not quite daring to touch. His voice lowered, rough with urgency. "You must stay hidden when the fight begins. Promise me this." Her eyes burned. "I can't just—" "You must," he snapped, though the fire in his tone softened almost instantly. He took a breath, his jaw flexing. "Amara, if they scent your fear, they will use it against me. If they see you, you are a weapon in their hands. Do not give them that chance." Tears stung her eyes. "You're asking me to sit still while you... Her throat closed. "You could die." Kael leaned in, so close she felt the heat of him, the wild energy coiled beneath his skin. "I will not die." His voice was steel. Then softer, almost breaking. "Not while you need me." Her heart hammered wildly, caught between terror and a forbidden ache she could no longer deny. He was a beast, an exile, a danger. Yet in that moment, as his silver gaze burned into hers, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. And then the night shattered. A howl split the air, deep, guttural, shaking the earth beneath their feet. It was not Kael's voice, but something darker, older. A challenge. A promise of blood. Kyle's head snapped toward the sound. His chest expanded, breath deepening as the beast within him surged. His body trembled with the urge to shift, to rise and meet the call. "They're here," he growled. The jungle erupted. From the shadows they came, eyes glowing like embers in the dark, bodies rippling with unnatural power. Wolves, enormous and sleek, fur bristling under the moonlight. At their center moved one larger than the rest, his coat black as tar, his eyes a molten gold that seared through the night. Amara gasped. Even from a distance she knew, this was no mere rival. This was an alpha. The black wolf stalked forward, shoulders rolling with predatory grace, and then before her eyes his body twisted, snapped, reshaped until a man stood in his place. Tall, scarred, his face sharp as a blade, his smile dripping venom. "Kael," the stranger purred, his voice rich with mockery. "The lost son of Silver. I wondered if exile had finally killed you. But here you are, rotting on an island, playing savior to a human." Kael stepped forward, his body a wall of fury. "Leave." The stranger laughed, the sound curdling Amara's blood. "Leave? No, brother. I came to finish what your pack could not. Exile was mercy. I bring judgment." His golden eyes slid to Amara, lingering on her swollen belly. His lips curled. "And what's this? You've taken a mate among mortals? Or merely found yourself a pet?" Amara's stomach knotted with revulsion, but she forced herself to stand tall, to meet that predatory gaze without flinching. Kael's snarl ripped through the clearing, feral and protective. "Look at me again," Kael growled, his voice thick with the promise of violence, "and you'll choke on your own tongue." The rival alpha only smirked. "Ah, so she matters." He spread his arms, inviting the night itself into his mockery. "Good. Then she will scream for me when I break you." The words were a spark to dry tinder. Kael's body convulsed, his skin tearing, bones shifting as the wolf inside him clawed free. Fur rippled across his frame, claws catching the moonlight, jaws splitting into fangs. In moments, the alpha stood, not man, not beast, but both, his silver eyes burning brighter than fire. The rival wolves lunged, chaos exploded, claws clashed with claws, teeth snapped through air thick with blood and fury. Kael was a storm unleashed, his power a symphony of violence. He met them head-on, his roars shaking the trees, his body a blur of fur and muscle. He tore one wolf aside with a single swipe, crushed another beneath his weight. But for each he felled, more circled. Amara's scream caught in her throat. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, but her feet refused to move. She watched, heart in her mouth, as Kael fought not for survival alone, but for her. Every strike, every snarl, every wound he took was a vow written in blood. The rival alpha entered the fray at last, his black wolf form towering, his golden eyes fixed only on Kael. When they collided, the ground quaked. Silver met shadow, light met darkness. They were not fighting as wolves. They were fighting as gods. Amara's hands clutched her belly, her tears hot on her cheeks. She prayed, though she did not know to whom, that Kael would rise, that he would not fall, that the child within her would live to see dawn. The battle raged, brutal and endless. Wolves fell, blood sprayed, the jungle howled with the violence of it. And still Kael fought, his body battered, his silver coat slashed with wounds, but his fire unbroken, until the rival alpha's jaws closed on his throat. Amara screamed. Kael roared, thrashing, his claws tearing trenches in the earth. But the golden-eyed beast held fast, his fangs sinking deeper, victory gleaming in his monstrous gaze. And then, something changed. Amara's voice cut through the chaos. "Kael!" It was not a scream of fear, but of defiance, of belief. Her voice cracked like thunder through the night, shattering the chokehold of despair. Kael's eyes flared with silver fire. He surged, muscles snapping with impossible strength, and drove his claws into the rival's chest. With a howl that split the heavens, he hurled the alpha aside, sending him crashing into the trees. The enemy wolves faltered, stunned. Kael stood, chest heaving, blood slick on his fur but his eyes burning brighter than ever. He looked once at Amara, just once, and in that glance was everything: promise, power, devotion. The rival alpha staggered to his feet, golden eyes narrowing, fury blazing. "This isn't over, exile. I will return. And when I do, I will take her." With a final snarl, he vanished into the shadows, his wolves retreating like smoke on the wind. Silence fell. Kael swayed, his body trembling, blood dripping from wounds too deep. His silver eyes dimmed. "Kael?" Amara whispered, rushing to his side as he shifted back into human form, collapsing to his knees. She caught his face in her hands, her tears falling onto his bloodied skin. "Stay with me, please. Stay." His lips parted, breath shallow. "I told you, I wouldn't die." His hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "Not while you need me." And then his eyes closed. The jungle held its breath. Amara's cry tore through the night. The jungle still smelled of blood. It clung to the trees, to the soil, to the very air she breathed, a metallic tang that refused to fade even as the night quieted. Amara knelt in the dirt, her hands pressed desperately against Kael's chest, watching the rise and fall of his breathing. Uneven, shallow, terrifyingly faint. For a moment, she could not move. She could only hear the echo of the rival alpha's promise. "When I return, I will take her." The words had sunk like hooks into her mind, and though the enemy was gone, his shadow still hung above them. But fear had no place here. Not now. "Stay with me," she whispered fiercely, her tears streaking his bloodied skin. "I don't care what you are. I don't care what comes, just stay." Kael's eyes were closed, his lashes clumped with sweat and dirt, his lips pale. Yet somewhere deep inside she knew. He heard her. He had always heard her, even when the world tried to silence her. The night stretched on, an endless trial of patience and terror. Amara worked with trembling hands, tearing strips from her tattered dress to bind his wounds, pressing cloth into gashes that seemed too deep to mend. She rinsed the cuts with rainwater she had collected in a hollowed stone bowl, murmuring soothing words, though she wasn't sure if she spoke to him or herself. The child within her shifted, restless, and she pressed her palm to her belly. "I know," she whispered. "I know you feel it too. But he's strong. He'll come back to us." The hours crawled. The moon dipped, silver fading to gray. Then the first light of dawn bled across the horizon. The jungle stirred, cautious, as though unsure whether it was safe to breathe again. And then beneath her hands Kael stirred. A faint groan rumbled in his chest. His eyelids fluttered, heavy, reluctant, but then those eyes, those impossible, silver eyes, opened just enough to meet hers. Amara's breath caught. Relief broke over her like a wave shattering into sobs. "You're alive. Oh God, you're alive." His lips moved, cracked and dry, barely forming the words. "Told you. Not while you need me." A broken laugh escaped her, half joy, half despair. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears wetting his skin. "Then don't you dare stop needing me either." For a long time, she simply held him there, whispering promises to the rising sun, letting her warmth anchor him. Slowly, the trembling of his body eased. Slowly, the color returned to his cheeks. He was not healed, not yet. But he was fighting. And Kael, she knew now, did not lose when he fought. Days passed in a fragile blur. Amara became healer, guardian, provider. She built a fire that smoked against the damp mornings, gathered herbs and leaves she remembered Kael mentioning in half-forgotten lessons. She chewed them into pastes, pressed them against wounds, prayed to every star she knew. And Kael endured. Though his body bore the savagery of battle, claw marks that raked his side, bruises that turned his skin to shadow. His spirit remained unbroken. At night, when the pain kept him from sleep, he would take her hand in his, squeezing weakly, and whisper fragments of strength. "You're stronger than you believe. You're the reason I still breathe. You've made me more than a beast." Each word burrowed into her heart, anchoring her to him as surely as the tide clings to the shore. And as his strength slowly returned, their bond deepened. One evening, the sun melted into gold across the canopy, painting the sky in fire and honey. Amara sat beside him, dabbing at a wound on his chest with a cloth dampened in cool water. He hissed, his muscles tensing under her touch. "Don't you dare growl at me," she muttered, though her lips curved despite her exhaustion. "I kept you alive. The least you can do is sit still while I clean you." His mouth twitched into the faintest smirk. "You're fearless, human." She arched a brow. "Human? I thought I was your mate." Silence stretched. Then Kael's gaze softened, his silver eyes reflecting the fire of sunset. "You are more than that, more than a word, more than a bond I never asked for and yet can't imagine living without." Heat rushed to her cheeks. For a heartbeat, she could not breathe. Then, with a shaky laugh, she leaned closer, resting her head gently against his shoulder. "You have the worst timing. You realize that?" He chuckled, the sound rough but rich, vibrating against her. "It seems fitting. I was never meant for peace. And yet, with you." His hand rose, trembling but steady enough to rest against her belly. "I dream of it." Her breath hitched. The child kicked beneath his palm as though answering him. And in that moment, something shifted between them, not just survival, not just fragile trust, but something enduring. Something that would outlive the jungle, the enemies, the exile, a family. The storm finally broke 3 nights later. Rain hammered the earth, cleansing it of the last stains of battle. Thunder rolled, not with menace but with power, as though the island itself declared renewal. Kael stood for the first time since the fight, his body weak but his spirit unyielding. Amara hovered beside him, ready to catch him if he faltered, but he did not. His bare feet pressed into the mud, his eyes lifted to the storm, and for the first time since she had known him, he did not look like a beast in chains. He looked like a king reborn. "Why does it feel?" Amara murmured, her hair plastered to her face like the island itself is watching us. Kael glanced at her, water streaking down the hard planes of his face. "Because it is. Because it knows. We survived its trials. We became its truth." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the jungle in silver brilliance, and Amara knew he was right. The island no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a crucible, one that had forged them into something new. Dawn came clear and bright, the air washed clean, the world shimmering with possibility. Kael sat beneath the rising sun, his wounds healing into scars. Amara curled against him, her head on his chest. Birds sang overhead. The ocean whispered against the shore, and for the first time in what felt like forever, peace did not feel like a lie. Amara pressed a kiss against his collarbone, whispering softly, "What happens now?" Kael's hand brushed her hair back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Now, we live. We fight when we must. We love when we can. And when the time comes," his hand rested once more against her belly, "we teach our child what it means to be both human and wolf, what it means to belong." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of joy so sharp it ached. "Do you really think we can build something here?" He smiled faintly, a rare, unguarded thing that melted the silver steel of his eyes. "We already have." And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of the night, Amara knew he was right. They were no longer stranded, no longer prey, no longer broken. On this island, they were more than survivors. They were a family. They were a pack. If you enjoyed this story, don't hesitate to subscribe, hit that like button, and share it with someone who loves a good twist of fate and passion. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what part stood out to you the most? And if you were in this story, who would you be? And what would you have done differently? Your thoughts might just inspire the next tale.